to NobelBiz webinars. Get ready for another session full of insightful information, tips, and knowledge shared by industry experts to help your contact center business grow.
Hey, Mike McGuire, NobleBiz. We are here with another exciting episode of NobleBiz webinars. I'm excited to be joined with Dave Grof. Dave is a long-term, I would consider veteran in the contact center space. What we really want to dive in today is we're going to talk about mini-TCPA, this new Texas, I think it's called SB 140 law that is going to be taking place 1st of September. And ultimately, we want to dive into how these different laws and regulations really impact the contact center. So, Dave, welcome. Glad to have you here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Seems like you catch up a lot at shows. Obviously, you're a customer and a partner of ours at NobleBiz, so I'm excited to get your feedback. Dave, you've been a veteran a long time in the contact center space. How did you really find yourself, owning now a contact center? And tell the audience a little bit about your journey and how you got here today.
Yeah, I started out on the sales side of the mortgage industry back in 2004. During that time, we always had telemarketing groups are internally generating applications for our loan officers. Kind of always had that in my background a little bit because we were managing those. That's back when we literally had printed out sheets of paper with rulers and pencils and literally picked up a telephone. And it used to work great because we didn't have to deal with, DNC and all that stuff, and people actually picked up the phone. So, that's kind of how I got started. Then I moved into the hearing aid business, running a contact center for Oticon. And about 8 years ago, just broke off on my own and, started to dive into different areas, insurances, mortgage, and still hearing aids, stuff like that. So that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah. True entrepreneur. So, kind of looking at your experience with going from, hey, we used to just do this old school, script, pick up the phone, dial, to where, when you went into the hearing industry, did it change technology wise, or is it still kind of old school?
I'd call it a step up from a pencil and paper, but not much. It was just the lists were built into your CRM, but we were still manually picking up a telephone and dialing a number. And then that progressed into the lists getting loaded into your dialer, and then you dial from there. And now, the whole thing's integrated from somebody filling out a form online, posting directly into your dialer, the dialer dialing it for you. And, so it's kind of seen it all the way through, really. And now, obviously,
so I know
you're adding SMS and all that other stuff into the mix now, too.
I know when we first met, a lot of the hurdle that you were running into was really around the spam labeling, right? To where you were calling out on certain DIDs and your carrier basically said, hey, we're not going to keep swapping out these DIDs. And so I think that's how we originally started our conversation.
We were needing to swap out DIDs constantly because everything was labeled as spam likely. And, we were calling representing people's doctor's offices. So it's not at any way, shape, or form a spam call. In fact, it's an important call, really. So, and then you deal with people saying, well, are you really the doctor's office? Because it says that it's spam. And it's like, no, we're calling from, Dr. Mike's office, but it just doesn't appear like that because of the way that the call's labeled.
Yeah, I brought that up because, I think, spam labeling, I think a lot of the FCC, the new Texas SB 140 law, a lot of this regulation is being thrusted upon you guys that are actually running the calls, doing the calls in the name of, helping the consumer, right? And you just pointed out that, you literally had to look at a complete new tech product because you just couldn't make outbound calls to customers from their own doctor facility, their own doctor's offices to where they're getting labeled. So obviously that's a big transition.
Huge.
You guys today now being, running your own contact center, how hard is that struggle of trying to keep your calls, clean, keep your DIDs not showing up as spam label? What does that process look like today that your teams has to manage?
Yeah, you gotta. It's a constant struggle, really, because you just never know necessarily when you're making a call what's going to come up, and sometimes you're just surprised by the patient or the consumer on the other end of the phone telling you, and then you kind of got to go into defense mode a little bit of, explaining who you are and stuff like that on something that should really be a pretty straightforward phone call. And ultimately, it doesn't really help the consumer because they're not answering calls or missing calls for important appointments or checkups or something like that they should be coming in for.
Yeah, it's interesting. So does it financially impact you? Is there anything that you guys have to do with tech, DIDs, anything like that now that you didn't have to do before? Is it costing you revenue?
Yeah, definitely. I think just agent morale on top of it, like, you're getting much lower contact rates than we used to see. Our contact rates now are significantly better than they were before we had switched over to you guys. When we weren't switching out DIDs and stuff like that before, our answer rates had dropped to like an all-time low.
Right.
Now, they're not what they were in 2004, but they're better now. But you gotta, we've got to stay on top of it, and we got to work with you guys and constantly make sure that we're doing things correctly and minimizing the chances of things showing up like that. So, yeah, and obviously we spend a lot more money per month now than we used to. We used to have a phone line. It was $35 a month, for a rep, but we didn't, it was like you didn't have to worry about swapping DIDs and changing DIDs. And then originally, like, it went from just one number basically to the local area, and then it switched to constantly switching them up. So yeah, it's been a progression over time, and it's more costly, and you're paying agents more as it is and stuff like that. So it definitely impacts everything.
And so let's dive into a little bit on the Texas law and other laws, I guess, that have been put in place, again, for the consumer, is at least how it's presented. So the new Texas law basically is doing a few things. Number one, I think it's classifying text messaging now as different than it was just in the past.
Right.
And so when you're looking at text messaging and you're looking at, making, millions of text, messages, I think text messaging was starting to replace some of the loss of contacts that you guys were getting because of some of the call labeling, people not picking up the voice call. So the industry kind of shifted now to saying, hey, we have text messaging that can now replace some of that loss of revenue and loss of traffic. And now you have states like Texas that are coming out with these new laws that are redefining, things that you can do, right? And so, in the past, you used to be able to just load up a list in a dialer, dial them out multiple times a day if you want, and people would pick up their phone, so on and so forth. So the new Texas law, how do you feel like that's going to impact you guys in your business moving forward? Or do you see any, advice that you can give other contact centers when it comes to laws
you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of my interpretation that like all of the outbound laws or TCPA laws or whatever will now apply kind of across the board to all areas of outreach in Texas. Is that essentially, that's how I kind of interpret it?
So, in the past, they said the TCPA, everybody assumed it's a phone call, treat it as a phone call, right? Yeah. And so when you do that, though, when you say, hey, it's a phone call, then you start running into your dialer regulations, right? And consent. And so in the past, consent was really, obviously you got to have consent in order to dial somebody on a dialer or be able to use like a text blasting solution, it's not considered manual calling. And then what happened was the Facebook ruling came out, which was a Supreme Court ruling that said, hey, the way that you guys are defining what a dialer and ATDS isn't what it is based off of real technology. So everybody just went back to kind of dialing leads like they used to. And so what is your thoughts around consent and having consent and using the type of technology in order to reach out to customers? What do you guys at Call for You do to make sure you stay out of the crosshairs?
I think, you have to, like, especially obviously with Texas but everywhere really, like you really need to go through your consent on your opt-ins and make sure that, you have all the proper language in there. And then, if there's state specific things with certain states, obviously like Texas, you really need to dot your I's and cross your T's, to make sure that, you're doing everything correctly. And for us at Call for You, it kind of depends on which campaign we're running to. Like, with all of our audiology and hearing aid clients, we have actual handwritten consent that they literally sign pen and paper in the offices. So we've got a little bit of an advantage, there. On some of the other type stuff, the insurance stuff or SSDI or, things like that, it's tricky, right? Because we've all dealt with the TCPA stuff and stuff like that. And, Texas kind of bringing it to another level, really. Like you just gotta pause and really go through things and maybe get some opinions of some attorneys on things like that, because it's just not worth the risk in my estimation. It's just, you really want to make sure that you have things buttoned up, because ultimately, like, these people are sitting out there waiting for you to make a mistake. And when you do, it's going to cost you.
It's very interesting because you talk to people, and a lot of people aren't just the sole provider of the lead gen process. So they're not just buying the leads, qualifying the leads, and then transferring. There's usually somebody else there in the middle that they're dealing with. So in that world, I'm assuming you got to make sure that not only are you compliant, but the other people that you're dealing with.
If you're not generating the data yourself from your own page or something like that, and you're buying from a third party vendor or something, you really are taking it's a big risk, because you need to trust that they're doing what they're doing. And obviously you should look into it, but at the end of the day, you're not the one that has control of it. So you don't really know what's happening and how things could be getting generated. And if you're
Yeah.
calling and SMSing to that data that you're purchasing from an outside party, if they're not in line, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, I'm starting to see more lawsuits on like TCPA world and stuff where the buyer, right? So they're buying leads, they're getting transfers, and now they're being held accountable for, you know, the vendor before that vendor didn't have consent or so on and so forth.
Exactly. And I mean, by the time it gets down to a final buyer, you might have 3 different people involved in that one phone call to get there. You know, you could have the person where the data came from, you could have the center that called it, you could have the fronter in between, and then you could have the buyer. You know, there's a lot of people removed by the time the call actually gets to somebody. So you know, it's a lot to make sure that everybody involved has all their ducks in a row. If not, you know.
One thing that we did at NobleBiz, so when I came here 5 years ago, we used to use a product to call cell phones that we called it a clicker or a clicker agent. And the reason we did that is because back when I was running contact centers, cell phones was what you had to have that direct consent, right? Or you had to dial them manually. And so a lot of people were dialing them manually, but when you dial leads manually, how efficient is it?
It's
like,
just the contact rate isn't high enough to where it's going to back out after you're paying for your dialer and your agents. And what percent you contact, what percent of those is a qualified lead, and then what percent goes over to your buyer and is deemed a qualified lead. So there's just, the contact rate's just too low to manually dial it. It's just not doable.
So what I'm seeing is a part of this Texas law is they're kind of redefining what that definition of kind of the ATDS, right? What a dialer is. And that's where I see people could get in trouble. Yeah. And I'll kind of digress a little bit. So a lot of people after the Facebook ruling, or people that I know and the people that I've worked with, they basically looked at that as saying that their dialer, their predictive dialer is not an ATDS. Right. So they're saying, hey, I'm not an ATDS, so I must be classified as manual. Right? But as we all know that's ever used a dialer is a dialer. So now these states are redefining what a dialer is. So in my mind, people that aren't using like a clicker type solution, or they're not manually calling, are at risk of what they're defining their predictive dialing system as an ATDS.
Definitely.
And that's where I think people need to watch out.
Yeah, I think people can talk themselves into anything to make themselves feel comfortable. But yeah, and I think I've also, if I'm not mistaken, I think they did something with the hours too, right? They tightened up the calling hours, and the fines for outside of those hours are much stricter and stringent than they would normally be.
So what I'm doing is I'm going to put on my ran a call center hat for the past 25, 30 years, right? And back in the day, we didn't have as much compliance. But as compliance kind of went in, we really relied on our tech companies to try to help us manage that, right? So like time zone filters, being able to set like certain contacts in the dialer or in the carrier network. Hey, I don't want to call these guys ever, or can't call this customer in this window of time. So I'm assuming you're going to heavily rely on your vendors to be able to say, hey guys, I cannot physically manage all these different states and all these different laws. We need to come together as a team and, program this information so we're not going to fall outside these lines. Because as you said, the penalties now are getting, this isn't like a $5 a call issue.
Correct.
This is 500 up to like 10,000 or something crazy per fraction.
Right. Exactly.
So, when I look at that and I'm looking at, you had Florida, you have Texas, you have all these other states now that are saying, hey, this is our state rules and regulations, and you got to follow these. What do you think your best practices are for people that are running contact centers like you to stay compliant? What is the best scenario?
I think if you apply some of the stuff for the stricter states, kind of across the board to some degree, like I think that.
Do you run in their own campaign? Do you
I've kicked around a few things. Like I've like with Texas, for example, it could be Texas runs completely separate campaign, even though it's the same buyer and stuff like that. Run the campaign completely separately as a standalone campaign with just Texas. So that's definitely a good option, I think. That way you can tailor it to all the changes that they've made, because there's some other stuff too in that that thing that's a little scary. Like I think, just for example, one thing is like the multiple infraction for one person, or the time frame. Like it, usually you have a TCPA thing with one person, like that's it. They can only do that one time or whatever. Now that's different with under the SB 142. Where if you make a mistake and call that person again, you have a problem again. There's a few things in there, but I think going through them, knowing all of them, and setting that up separately is a really smart idea.
Yeah, that's the way I would look at it as well. Because what I've seen in the past is when it was just like one state or two states, people just didn't call, right? But now in states like Florida and Texas,
Florida and Texas are too big for us to say we're just throwing that state out. It's just there's too much business there, and we do too much business there to just throw it aside. If it was, Montana, we could say, okay, we're not calling Montana anymore. Texas isn't an option to do that. On the flip side, we just have to really look at our process, work with your partners that you're working with, whether that be your dialer company, your data supplier, or any call centers outside of what you own that you're working with. You really need to get them together, dig in on everything, and make sure that you have it set up and correctly and are running by the new guidelines.
Yeah, I think that was really sound advice of separating those kind of in their own campaigns, treating them differently, and not just using this Facebook ruling says that this isn't an ATDS, so I'm good.
I think especially, Mike, like that the SMS end, SMS has always just been a scary thing to me. So I think if you're a company that does a lot of SMS and utilizes that you really need to look at what you're doing in Texas, especially. Because that's just a mega volume play, right? Like you're sending out tons and tons of those messages, and it's now with the phone call laws applying to basically an SMS is the same thing. You definitely have to look at what you're doing there, because those fines can add up huge.
Well, not only that, the reason why I think SMS is scary is you're leaving a receipt.
Wow, it's right there.
Right?
It's right there.
Leave it on the SMS. all the evidence, the phone call, everything. Like, it's hard to refute that, yeah, we didn't call you. We called you with,
Yeah.
Manual calling versus an ATDS.
Yeah, right here.
Yes, we have
Here
consent.
it is.
You just have,
Right.
they have the information. So, one thing that we did when I ran contact centers, especially when it came to like calling cell phones, using SMS, is exactly what you said. We said, hey, how can we create our environment to be compliant from soup to nuts? From the time buy a lead, we need this information. We need a written consent. We need our partner to make sure they supply X, Y, and Z. Maybe we even put in our contracts that this lead that you're selling me or that you're giving me is TCPA compliant, have consent. So that way you're not just leaving, you're not working certain leads a certain way. You got other leads you're working a certain way. It's really looking at it globally.
The TCPA never comes back to a data supplier.
Right. It's always to that person that made the call.
Center. It never goes back to a data supplier. So that's why ultimately it's on us as call center people, to make sure that we're working with the right data provider or we're generating it ourselves. Either, obviously if you have the ability to generate yourself, if you have the ability to do anything yourself, you're always better off. Just because you control the process from A to Z. But I also understand that's not doable in a lot of cases. So, you got to make sure that the data place that you're working with and buying from is doing things correctly. Because like I said, that any issues that arise aren't coming back to them. They're coming back to you.
Gotcha. Well, I know we have contact.io coming up here in like 9 days or whatever. And obviously this law, Texas SB 140, is going to be talked about extremely. We have a panel that we're going to be talking about call labeling, spam, and there's more and more, right? Like, is my dialer compliant? Am I classified as a manual call? So I always tell people, they're like, why should I go to conferences? Why should I spend the money? I mean, ultimately, it keeps you updated on people that are having to deal with this, just like yourself. You're having to say, what are we going to do as an organization to stay compliant? How are we going to call Texas? How are we going to make sure that our dialer, our technology is not classified as an ATDS? And so at these shows and these conferences, like-minded people get together and we get to do panels and we get to talk to people.
I think there's so much more that those shows have to offer other than just, business development and meeting new buyers and stuff like that. I mean, we're presenting on a lot of the presentations that spam likely and scam likely calls. That has a huge impact on the call center business and on the buyer end too. How many calls that show up as spam likely are going to result in somebody giving you their checking account information? I don't know. Not a lot, So it really it has a huge impact. So I think there's a lot of great things that come out of the shows outside of the business development, like staying up to date on stuff like this and how to work more efficiently. Definitely going to be.
I think the show's going to be great, and it seems like it's weird because this show every year is like perfect timing for new regulation that ends up getting launched, right?
Yeah.
Because every year they do the shows at the first of the year, and usually there's not much because of Christmas and all that, and then end of the year and everything's kind of flushed out. So it's interesting that this show is going to be unique because it's always sandwiched in the middle where you can go and, try to get best practices on, these things that will definitely affect your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this show's to me over the last, 3 years or so, every year this show is kind of gaining momentum and popularity. I feel like too, there's more and more people that are attending, and every year it seems to get better.
Yeah, I agree. What's your advice? So if you were a contact center, which we usually have many that listen to our show, I always like to say, a lot of people just say, I'm just going to pay the fees. I'm going to ignore these regulations. Like, what's your advice on that type of cavalier attitude in this case specifically?
It takes one person and one class action to put you out of business for good. Believe me when I say I'm speaking from experience, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we had in 2020, we had a $400,000 TCPA settlement. Yep. So that was, right at the beginning, kind of where all this craziness had started. We had a really, really big buyer. We ran into the wrong person with the wrong attorney, and it turned into a class action, and it resulted in a $400,000 settlement. So it's real.
Well, I definitely, I appreciate
it. Can't happen.
Yeah.
I can assure you that it can. Yep.
That I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of times people, have that not me mentality, right? It's not going to happen to me.
I was so naive to it at the beginning. It was like, DNC, whatever. What the hell's that? We're doing great. We're killing it. And that happened. It was an incredibly, incredibly expensive legal process on top of the settlement. And we were fortunate enough to get through it, but I could see how many people would not be able to recover from that. So it's real, and it can happen. It can happen to anyone, and it only takes one to really put you under, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I know that people ask me all the time, how do I stay current on this type of stuff, right? Obviously, we all have the internet, right? Like if you're in this business, you should educate yourself on any of these. Some of my best ones, I'm on the board of Reach. Reach is an organization built in the lead gen space to self-manage, right? So the idea is to say, hey, these issues are real. These are the best practices of the industry. You should be following these to keep yourself safe. Now, we also have TCPA World, which Eric Troutman, those guys do a great job, I think, of updating everybody on current stuff that's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, when that actually happened to us, Mike, we actually went out after that, and we had a TCPA attorney, and we spent a lot of hours kind of going through things and saying, what are we not doing right here? Because obviously it's something that you never want to go through again. It's not like paying a $1,500, fine. It turns into a class action. It's a whole different ball game. And, so we actually went to a TCPA attorney and we said, hey, let's sit down. We want to talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and tell us if there's something that we need to be doing differently.
Awesome. I would say that's very sounded to anybody listening to this, right?
Definitely.
If you're in this game and you're in the outbound call space, it's already difficult. You're working on lower margins, but as you just said, you never know. One bad call to one person can put your whole organization, all your people, everybody at risk. So obviously sitting down with the TCPA attorney, having them look at your call flows, having them look at where you buy data, look at how you're doing your selling of leads, whatever your industry is. I think that is super sound advice and could save you a lot of heartache in the future.
Absolutely. 100%. It's well worth the investment.
Any other advices that you've had to deal with, or anything that you want to share that or just some good things that you've ran into in the world of compliance, regulation, anything like that?
I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of success in a lot of the things that we do with internet leads coming in. Where we either our clients or us have specific paths in place, and those leads are posting to us. Where that's how I'd say we're doing a lot of our calling now, even in the hearing aid and audiology fields, which the people have finally decided to change a little bit and say, we gotta get out of the ancient times. It takes a lot of arm twisting, but we're having a lot of success there. The contact rates are good.
These are higher intent type leads, people that are just going on.
Yeah, but people are very happy with the results, and so I'd say that's kind of like our biggest area that we're seeing growth in.
Would you say most of the issues, in things like that people are running into is from this, kind of older model of buying age leads, qualifying them, transferring them to buyers? Is that really probably where we see the most risk at today?
Definitely. All like the co-reg paths and stuff like that. And I understand better than anybody, like we need stuff to call. We need data to call in order to run our businesses and stuff like that. And the higher intent type stuff isn't easy to generate and stuff like that. But the results are definitely better. And as far as a risk, like it's much more comfortable to me. Knowing that that's what we're working on and doing.
Well, this is the way I look at it. I think the industry as a whole, especially in the lead gen space, dodged a huge bullet when the one-to-one consent got killed.
Huge.
Right?
Yep.
Huge bullet. I think we could have, who knows what would be going on today. Now, what I'm afraid of is if the industry doesn't police itself, if it doesn't say, hey, we're not going to buy any of this sketchy data anymore. We're not going to, have these, leads that maybe I buy a house and now you're calling me for yard service or siding, and you're calling me 30 times, after a year and a half of me putting in a lead. So that where I'm nervous is the consumer coming back saying, hey, they haven't fixed any of the behavior. I'm still getting called on these auto dialers. I'm getting called 5 times a day for something that's not even relevant to what my original lead was. So I would assume that these, people doing it right will help, stop some of this regulation like Texas SB 140, right? These are really like coming out because of the bad actors that are in the space.
Well, it's definitely still happening. I mean, I get calls myself for things that I never asked for or have nothing to do with, so it definitely is still occurring. But, again, I think it's really, you got to do your due diligence on who you're working with, who you're buying from, or it's a matter of time before you have an issue, essentially, because like I said, it's definitely still happening. So, and you gotta coach your partners and tell them, know exactly who you're working with, what they're doing, minimize your risk as much
Well,
as
I know
possible.
one thing. It's been amazing working with you guys at Call for You Marketing. I know anybody that I've talked to that's used your guys' service as a BPO has been super, impressed with the fact that, when I look at your industry and some of the work you do, you've had clients for a long time. You've had clients that continue to work with you. obviously you do things compliantly. You talk to attorneys, you look at stuff. So if I was a buyer, I was a company out there, why should I work with Call for You? What is kind of your pitch on, hey, we'd love to be your BPO outsource partner?
Yeah, I think that we're unique in a sense that we really work hard on communication with our clients, and we integrate our callers with them. I mean, we have buyers that know callers that work at Call for You personally and talk to them, and it's a different kind of a relationship. Like, we really are an extension of whoever's team, right? It's not just a body and a seat and stuff like that. We really work hard and want to make sure that we're providing the top service, and we want that caller to know the ins and outs of that business and so forth. So there's a lot of back and forth between our buyers and our callers and our team leaders and stuff like that, to where, like I said, it's not just a body and a seat making a call,
So I'm assuming you guys are open for business. If anybody watching needs a call center that's compliant, that can get performance, how do they reach out to you, Dave?
Yeah, you can just shoot me an email, Dave@callforyoumarketing.org, or shoot me a text to my cell phone or LinkedIn, Teams, Telegram, any smoke signals, whatever you want. Well, but we provide both inbound and outbound services. And we're always
well, I know you got a good tech stack that will help your client. I'm a little partial to that. We're going to be at contact.io. Dave's going to be there. I'm going to be there. We're going to have a panel on the first day, I think second slot, about some of this with call labeling, with some of the regulation. Jameen from Troutman and Mean's going to be on there. We have a great panel. Steve Biederman from NobleBiz. So we're excited. You can reach both me and Dave at the show and at any time. Dave, thank you for joining the call today and
thanks for having me. It's always working with you guys is amazing, and it's helped us tremendously in everything that we do contact center related. So we appreciate it.
I think it's important, guys, to get the firsthand knowledge from people that are dealing with these regulations and how they're navigating that, and some of their best practices to our NobleBiz ecosystem. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in Denver.
Sounds good. See you guys there.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Mike.